So in this part we're going to be turning our rendered map of Europe into more of a game. The first thing I'm going to work on is to implement a camera scroll which will be controlled by the world class. So for this we can go back to our world class, which was in the geo script. We're going to initialize a scroll variable inside the world class and make this a vector2. We're going to initialize it with the offsets that we originally defined up here. So these will be like this. Then we're going to create a new method called update camera. So this is going to look like this. And this is going to take some key inputs and change the value of the camera scroll. And then that camera scroll will be used in all of the different types of rendering that we're going to do in our game. So we're going to initialize or kind of get the keys that have may or may not have been pressed, and I'm going to use WASD as the keyboard inputs. So for that, you just want inside of keys, you want to look for any key, and if it's pressed, then it returns true. So if we're pressing the A key, what we want to do is move the scroll kind of in the left direction. So I'm going to do that. Otherwise, so this is the kind of horizontal panning. We're going to look for the D key, and that's going to be then moving the scroll in the opposite direction. So that's positive 10. For vertical panning, we're going to use WNS. So if keys pg.kw .scroll.y, and that's going to go like this, and then we're going to have the reverse for S. So, whoops, and here we go. There we go. So yeah, so pressing these keys is going to change these scroll values. I'm also going to include a kind of reset, just in case we pan too far away from the center. We're going to say, well, if we press the space bar, let's reset. Okay, now that we have a scroll value, we want to also include that into the country class, so that we can use it when we're drawing the countries. So we're going to get rid of these offsets and replace them with the scroll. So here we're going to add an additional parameter, and we're going to call it scroll, and this is going to be the scroll in the X direction, and this is going to be the scroll in the Y direction, and we can use this again down here. Now we need to update, because we're calling the country draw method down here from the world class, and it takes an additional argument now, so we need to give it the self.scroll. For calling the update camera, I guess we have two choices. We probably will be making an update method in the world, so that's probably a good place to put it. So so self.update here. This is not going to return anything, and right now it's just going to call the update camera method. So now that our world class has this update method, obviously it needs to be called somewhere in the main game loop. And so right now our main game loop is in game. So we go back to game, we have this empty update method, and so here we're going to call self.update.world. Okay, so this should be ready now to give it a little test. So I'm going to go back to main. I'm just going to make sure that I am in the right environment. So that's the virtual environment that we created last episode, and I can run main. And now using the keys, I can kind of pan around Europe, and that looks okay. The next thing I'm going to work on is being able to hover over different countries in Europe and having some sort of visual indicator that we are hovering our mouse over a country. So to do this, we're going to go to the GeoScript. We're going to be working in the country class. I'm going to import some useful functions from Shapely. So from shapely.geometry, import when we're looking for point and polygon. So the first thing we're going to use is the polygon. So we're going to create this polygon object inside the class, and basically we just need to feed it a list of coordinates, which we have here. So this is just polygon and then self.coords. And we're going to use this polygon to provide a check of whether some two-dimensional point is contained within this polygon. So we're going to give the country an update method where we're constantly on each game loop iteration, we're going to check whether our mouse is contained within this polygon. So go self, we're going to feed it a mouse position, which is going to be a vector 2. Again, returning none. I'm going to give a kind of Boolean variable here called self.hovered, and in the update method we're going to kind of control this variable. So we're going to initialize this as false, and also we're going to initialize it on every update loop. We only change this if we detect that the mouse position is within the polygon. So again, we're going to put equals false here, and then we're going to create this point object. So in here we're going to feed it the mouse position, so that's the x and y coordinates, and then this point class has this really handy method of is it within some sort of geometric shape, and here we can pass it this polygon object that we created before. So if this condition has been met, as in if the mouse is within this polygon, at that point we can say yes, this country is currently being hovered, so that will equal true. Said before that we wanted some sort of visual indicator about whether it's being hovered. I'm going to just change the color of this polygon when it's being hovered, but you know, feel free to do some other thing. So we're going to say if it is being hovered, then we're going to draw this polygon red. So that's the RGB for red, and that's if self.hovered is true. Otherwise, we're going to render it in the previous blue color. Okay, because we've now included an update method for checking whether the country is being hovered, we need to include that update method somewhere. And I'm going to put this into the world update method. So we first need to initialize a mouse. So this is going to be pg.mouse.getPos. Okay, that's going to return us I believe it's a tuple. And we can use this mouse position and call these updates of the countries to test whether they're being hovered. So we're going to iterate through the countries that we've stored in our self.countries. And again, this is a dictionary, so we're only interested in the actual country class itself. So just going to iterate through the values of the dictionary. And here we're going to say country.update. Now this update method only wants to have the mouse position, but we have to be conscious that we have a scroll in place. So we need to basically reverse the effect of the scroll to make sure that the mouse position does align with the actual country positions. So to do that, we're going to, we'll expect a vector 2, so we're going to initialize this vector 2, and we're going to say, well, the x position of the mouse, and because we're minusing this scroll value everywhere when we're rendering, the inverse of that operation is to add it. So instead we're going to do, and this is actually self.scroll.x, and we're going to do the same thing for the y, so that's mouse1 plus self.scroll.y, and this should be mouse pos, not mouse. So now we can go back to main and run this again to give a quick check. Okay, and this seems to be working, and this Shapely package works really well. I mean, it's really quite precise about when the mouse is hovering over a polygon, so this is exactly what we need for this type of game, where we want to kind of have very precise control about which country we're clicking on. And the next thing we're going to work on is to do some text rendering in the game. The first text rendering we're going to do is display the number of units a country has. So to do this, I'm going to first create some utility functions for rendering text. So I'm going to create a util script, and I'm just going to copy and paste some utility functions that I've written before. Rather than write it out line by line, I advise you just to go and grab this code from GitHub. It should be fairly clear what it's doing. It's just initializing a font object and creating a text surface, and then rendering that to some other surface, which is normally the screen. Okay, so I'm just going to be using these two functions. So to draw some units in our countries, going to go back to the geo class. We're going to use the random package. We are also going to import these draw utility functions. So this is draw text and draw multiline text. I'm going to initialize the number of units that a country starts with. So this could be anything really. We're going to start off quite low and just say that a country will randomly initialize with between 1 and 3 units, kind of inclusive. So we can do like that. Then to draw the number of units, we're going to go down to the draw method. Actually, before we do this, we do need a position to render these units within the country. Now, our countries are composed of a kind of series of coordinate positions. The natural place for presenting some information about the country would probably be in the center of that country rather than along the boundaries of the country. So we need to find this center position. So I'm going to create another method here saying define get center, and this is going to return to us hopefully some central position of our country. So I'm going to let this return a vector 2. And to get this position, we're simply going to iterate through all of the x and y values within our chords and return the mean values of those x's and y's. So I'm just going to put return pg.vector2. I am going to use the pandas series here, so from pandas import series, just because it has a nice way of converting a list into a series, and then you can directly calculate the mean. So in here we're going to go series x for x comma y in self.chords, so just taking the x value, and then finally we're going to calculate the mean of this series, and we are going to do the same for the y. Only difference is we're just going to return that y value. So all we have to do is when we initialize this country is to, as long as we've stored these self.chords, we can say self.center equals self.getCenter. Okay. Then going back to the draw method. So now we're going to use the draw text utility function. So here we're going to pass it the screen. We are going to display the number of units of the country. Because this is an integer, we're going to coerce it to a string, so self.units within this string. Color, we're going to make this white, just like our boundaries. Here we're going to do self.center.x minus self.scroll. No, this is actually just scroll.x, and then the same for the y, so that's self.center.y minus the scroll.y. We're going to center it, that's fine, and we can leave the default size of 20. Okay, going back to main to test this out. And that looks like it has worked. We can see numbers displayed within each country. Now, for some of these countries, it works really well. For example, France, Germany, Poland. Yeah, the number is exactly where we want them to be. I think these are basically because these countries are slightly more kind of rectangular. For some other countries, it has worked less well. For example, Norway, because of the shape of Norway, when we take this kind of overall average, this 2 actually is the value for Norway. So. Which is appearing in Sweden. This is a bit annoying. I am going to leave it like this for now. I think the solutions for this might be either a kind of series of if statements just to offset some of the values that need offsetting, or a slightly more sophisticated kind of get center method that maybe checks whether the position is within the polygon, and then if it's not, does some other clever way of finding it, but I'm just going to leave it like this for now. So far we can hover different countries in our map, and also there's a bit of data displayed about that country actually rendered on top of the country. Another thing we might want to do is to have a kind of specific panel to render if we are hovering a country, because maybe these countries contain many different types of data that we would be interested in, and having a kind of panel just for displaying that data would be handy. So that's the next thing we're going to work on. So to do this, we're going to implement it in the world class. So that's down here, just for hovering countries panel. So firstly, we're going to say, are we hovering a country? So the world class, even though we kind of track this in the individual countries, we actually want to know from the world class whether a country is being hovered. We're going to initialize this as none to say that no country is being hovered. Next, we're going to create a hover surface. So this is a kind of panel that's going to render in the game, and will store some or present some data about that country. Going to make it 300 pixels width and have a height of 100 pixels. Also going to implement this flag, just because I probably would like to add a little bit of transparency. It makes it slightly better looking. So here, now that we've created the surface, we can fill it with a color. I'm going to use a slightly darker blue from the countries, so that's 25, 42, 86, and this last element represents the alpha channel. So 255 would be a totally opaque surface, but we want to give it a bit of transparency, so I'm going to say 155 here to make it slightly transparent. Now we need to track which country is being hovered. So down here, when we were basically looking to see which country is being hovered, as we're iterating through our countries, if the current country is being hovered, then self.hovered country equals country. So that's kind of a reference to the country class. But we want to make sure that this is also reset every game loop, because once we're hovering a country, that only lasts so long as the mouse is on that country. So we're also going to say self.hovered country. So before we're going into this loop, self.hovered country is back to being none. Now for rendering the panel, I'm going to give it its own method, just to keep the class a bit more organized. So we're going to say, what am I doing? Define draw hovered country. This is going to take a screen, so a surface, and we're going to first do screen.blit this hover surface that we just created, and we can choose many different locations in the screen to render the surface. I'm going to put it kind of towards the bottom right, but that's quite arbitrary. Here I'm going to hard code the values based on the dimensions of the screen we made, but you may want to make this a bit more generalizable. So because we had a width of 1280, I'm going to start rendering it 310 pixels away from the right hand side of the screen. So 300 pixels because that's the width of the screen rendering, and I just want to give it a bit of padding, so that's where the 10 comes from. And then the same with the Y, so it was 100 pixels, it had 100 pixels of height, and we're giving it 10 pixels of padding. Here we're going to draw some text onto this hover surface, so we go pass it the screen. For the text, we're going to give it the name of the country, so hovered country will be a country class object, so we know that has a name. Gonna make this white. Here we want to put it in the center of horizontally in the center of our hover surface. So we're going to do 1280 minus 310 divided by 2. Yeah, because this will 310 is the total width, and so dividing by 2 puts us in the center. And then for the the Y position, we're going to make it kind of at the top of this hover surface. Going to center this one, and we're going to make this slightly larger at 24. Then the other thing we're going to render is the number of units. I'm going to start by doing a multi-line text because we may want to add additional data to this later. But the arguments are exactly the same as draw text. The only other thing is that we want to include the text in a list, so that represents the kind of multi-line text. So here we got units. And then again, we're going to extract the units from the country. So that's hovered country dot units, and again, because it's an integer, we're making that a string. This is going to be white, and here we're going to render it on the left-hand side of this hover surface. So that's 1280 minus 310. So that puts us in the kind of furthest left-hand position, and we're just going to give it +5 to give it a tiny bit of distance, so it's not exactly on the edge of the panel. We're going to do the same or similar thing for the Y position, like this. We're not going to center this because we want it to be left aligned, and we're going to make this a slightly smaller font size than that. So now that we've finished this draw hovered country method, we can include it in our draw method. So we're going to say if self dot, because we only want to display this panel if a country is not being hovered. So we're going to say if self dot hovered country is not none, so we are actually hovering something, then we're going to do self dot draw hovered country and pass it the screen. So again, going to main, let's test if this has worked, and we can see that it has. So now we have this kind of little screen appears in the right hand corner, and this can display any sort of useful information that we might want to know about the country. So right now it's just got units, but it could contain whatever we think is useful information to display to the player. The last thing we're going to do in this part is to make a start on the player class. So inside of source, I'm going to create a new script called player. And here I'm going to import PyGame, so PyGame is PG. I'm also going to use the country and world classes from Geo. So from source.geo, import country and world. I'm going to define the player class. And inside of the init, I am going to pass it the country. So this is the country that the player will start as. So that's going to be a country class. I'm also going to pass it the world, so the player has an easy way of interacting with the world. So like that. And I'm going to give the player a specific color, so passing it a tuple. I'm going to save all of this information inside the player class, so that's the country, the world, and also the color, so like this. Now, because I am basically assigning this country to this player, I also want to make sure that the country in our map shows up as the player's color, not that default blue color that we set. So a couple of things need to change for that. So inside of Geo, I'm going to now take this blue that we defined, and I'm going to put self.color, which is yet to be defined. And then here I'm going to put self.color equals that. The reason why I'm doing this is now that inside the player class, we can change the color of this country to the color of the player. So also inside the player class, we want to kind of define the logic for certain actions the player can take. One of these actions is the ability to place units within countries that the player controls. I'm just going to kind of write some sort of template code now, which we will fill in at a later point. The next one is going to be the ability to move units between countries that the player controls. And then the last one is going to be if we want to launch an attack on a neighboring country from one of the countries we control. So this is going to be the attack country, and that's going to be pass. We're going to give the player an update method, which we're going to call from the game class, and we are going to tell the player kind of what kind of phase we're in. So these phases might be a movement phase, a placement phase, or an attacking phase. And so we're going to kind of use this to do a kind of series of sort of if-else statements to make sure that we are doing the correct action that aligns with the phase. So if phase equals, the first one's going to be place units, then we're going to do self.place units. Else, if the phase equals move units, then we're going to call the move units method. And finally, if the phase equals attack country, we're going to call the attack country method. Now, the only one of these methods that we're going to do in this episode, because the episode is already getting too long, is going to be the place units one. So to place units, we want to be able to click on a country that we control and increase the units count of that country. Because we're using an action, we want to also include a timer, because if you in PyGame, if you click, like left click for example, that left click will register multiple times because the game loop iterations are so quick. But we only want this to occur once and then maybe reset every, I don't know, 0.3 seconds. So to make sure that that's the case, we can include a timer. So this can start off as 0, or I'm just going to take it as the from the time class in this can be initialized as 0 or this, which is the timestamp when this class is created. Then in place units, we're going to do now is the current time of the application, and then we're going to say if we left click, so that's pg.mouse.getPressed, and it is the first element in that list, and now minus self.timer, and this is in milliseconds, so we're going to say is greater than 300 milliseconds. We're saying, okay, this is a valid placement, so we're going to reset the timer to be now to make sure that it doesn't trigger on the next game loop iteration. And what we're going to do is increase the number of units in our country. Now, this could be any of the countries that we control. Right now we haven't programmed that, so we're just going to use the country that we are. So now to use the player, we're going to go to the game class. We're going to create the player after the world, because we need to pass the world inside of the player class. So we're going to, so this is going to be self.player. I need to import it actually. So from source.player import player, and then self.player equals player, and the first argument is a country, so we can grab that from the world class. So self.world.countries, you can either use the square brackets here. This is a dictionary, so square brackets or get will work fine. And let's just be France. Also going to give it the world, and we're going to give it a color. I guess because we're France, we can be a nice blue. So that's RGB, red, green, blue, so we're going to give it just a blue color. Then down in the update section, we are going to do we also need to define the phase in the world. So self.phase, and we're going to, for now, just leave it as place units, because that's the only method that we've programmed inside the player class. So down in the update method, we're going to do self.player.update, and it's expecting a phase. So we're going to give it the self.phase that we just created. Finally, we can test this out. So let's go back to main, run it. We can see that France is a different color to all the other countries, kind of indicating that this is the country of the player. Again, we're hovering over, so it's turning red, and I'm going to just start clicking, and we can see that each time I click, the number of units inside of this country increases. So this is a very rough implementation of how we are going to place units in the future.